Welcome everyone to Volunteering with Your Pet, sponsored by Pet Partners. Our presenter this evening is Susan Tiss. Go ahead, Susan.
Hi everyone, hopefully you can hear me. I just unmuted myself and hopefully I'm not too loud. As Felice so kindly said, I'm Susan Tiss and I have been a volunteer in one way or another with Pet Partners for probably approaching 10 years at this point. And I'll tell you a little more about that in a moment. This presentation tonight is designed to orient you to the Pet Partners Therapy Animal Program as a way that you can volunteer in your community with your pet. It sounds like most of you are dog owners like me. We have a few cat owners also love the cats. So I'll try to make, most of my examples tonight will be dogs anyway, but I may not mention a lot of other animals throughout the process. And pardon, for those who are cat owners, pardon my dog-centric approach to this. We're gonna cover tonight the requirements and the process for registering with Pet Partners. And for those of you that determine throughout this webinar tonight that volunteering with your pet may not be the right fit for you or your animal, don't worry, because we will discuss some other ways to be involved. I'm actually one of those folks right now. I'm in between having an animal that I volunteer with for a little while longer, so I do other work like these webinars. Pet Partners is a national volunteer organization, and we have close to 15,000 teams, that's right, 15,000 teams in 50 states as well as Canada. Our mission is to improve the human health and well-being through the power of the human-animal bond. And as I said, I'm Susan Tiss. I have been a handler with Pet Partners for almost 8 years with the lovely dog that you see on the left here. There's actually only 2 dogs here, even though there's 4 photos. Rory is the beautiful boy with the long hair on the left. He was my partner in many things, including pet therapy for many years. He sadly died about a month ago from cancer. He was 13. He lived a very good life, and he was a fantastic therapy animal. My current pup that I still have is a Nara that you see there on the right. Those are both shots of her. She is still in training. She is almost 4 years old, and she is almost ready to be a therapy dog. And I'll give you some more information about why it takes that long sometimes. And mostly, Rory and I visited at hospitals and occasionally hospices and sometimes nursing homes or assisted care facilities. He primarily visited with adults, and I'll explain a little more about that too as we go on tonight. I think Nara will probably do some different types of visits, also hospitals, but maybe some other things just based on some of her likes and her disposition and her strengths. So we'll learn more about that this evening as well. All right, let's see if I can get this slide to advance. Try that again. There we go. So speaking of the goals for tonight, therapy animal teams come in all shapes and sizes, and they visit in a lot of different settings, more and more all the time, in fact. Tonight, we are going to address what makes a good therapy animal team, and that's not just your pet, it's also you, the handler. Pet Partners' reputation is the gold standard among therapy animal organizations, and this is due to the rigorous standards that we have for both our animals and our handlers. You're going to learn tonight about these requirements as well as what you will need to do to actually complete your registration process and become a Pet Partners therapy animal team. Now, not every animal enjoys therapy work, and this session will also help you decide if it is now time to get started on the process to become a Pet Partners therapy animal team, and if not, we'll provide some other information about ways that you can promote and celebrate the human-animal bond even if you're not actively visiting with your current personal pet. So let's talk a little bit about where we visit. I mentioned hospitals and a couple of the other ones on this list when I talked about Rory. Our teams visit in a variety of locations and with a wide range of client types. Any of the settings that you see listed on this slide, and maybe other ones that you think of but aren't listed, can be very rewarding. But the overarching consideration all the time is what is the setting that will best match you and your animal. That's going to be a central theme tonight, and it is a central theme at Pet Partners in everything we do. You'll hear it again and again. Always, you are your animal's best advocate. Your job as the handler is to set everyone up for success, and that includes your animal and the clients that you are interacting with. I mentioned that Rory and I primarily visited at hospitals and other facilities, mostly with adults. Rory and Anara, if you couldn't tell from the picture, are both border collies, and they are herding dogs. And herding dogs want to herd, whether that's people or animals. And I learned through a couple of different tries with Rory that working with children, such as in a Read to a Dog program, which you'll hear more about this evening, or even in some settings in pediatrics where there are many children running around, and the idea is for the dog to spend their time paying attention to one particular child at a time. Rory wasn't very comfortable doing that because he thought his job would be to go out and get all those other kids that were running around. So in that type of setting, he was very uncomfortable, and he would demonstrate to me with his physical behavior and just the look in his eyes that he was not comfortable. And of course, the children could pick up on the fact that he wasn't focused on them because he was focused on the other children. So I didn't visit with children in pediatrics or with Read to a Dog. I primarily visited with adults where we could truly be one-on-one, and there weren't a lot of other things triggering his herding instinct and making him want to do something else. So that's just one example. Let's go to next. So now that we've talked about the types of places that we will visit, let's talk about the kind of visits. Some visits are social in nature. That's primarily what I did with Rory most of the time. And these could just be a chance to make conversation for you with the person that you're visiting with, cheer someone up, reduce their stress, or provide a welcome distraction with both you and your pet as a team. These can happen in a variety of settings, from hospitals to retirement communities to airports and dentist's office. Even colleges are embracing stress relief events during finals weeks where teams are invited to provide study breaks. We have a very active group in Arizona where I am that visits at both the university and the community colleges. We even have animals that visit at other types of events with younger children, and even in the minimum security prison, in fact. So there's lots of different opportunities that are truly social in nature. Other visits can be more structured and may be part of a therapeutic treatment plan. For example, a team might work with a physical therapist, and brushing the dog might be exercise for the patient. There are also, I mentioned earlier, reading programs. Reading programs are becoming very popular in the schools and libraries. And in these programs, kids practice reading aloud to the therapy animals, who are generally very good listeners. They never correct your pronunciation or make any weird facial expressions to indicate that you've got it wrong. They just enjoy listening to you. Pet Partners offers handlers an option to enroll in a Read With Me program where you can learn reading-specific support and education. If that is something you're interested in doing, I encourage you, once you are a registered team, to look into that Read With Me program because you'll learn a lot more there. Pet Partners also has a program where therapy animals can be used as motivation for physical fitness. It's called Walk With Me. And whether you're going on walks in a mall with senior citizens or hosting a walk with coworkers during a lunch break, we all know that exercise is more fun with others and even more fun when you're in the company of a therapy animal. So we have information on our website about the Walk With Me program as well once you're a registered team. Ultimately, as a Pet Partners registered team, you get to choose to participate in whatever kind of visit works best for you and your pet, as long as it is the right fit for you and your pet. And that I'll probably come back to again and again this evening too. It's really important to decide and to figure out what the right environment is for both of you. So we've talked about my dogs, and I know that you all have dogs and cats, but as Felice mentioned at the start, there are a number of other animals that we also register. So let's take a few moments to look at that. Pet Partners currently registers 9 different species of animals for therapy work. The most popularly registered are dogs, followed by cats, and then horses. I do want to note for you that wild or exotic animals such as snakes, ferrets, lizards are not eligible for registration as therapy animals. And in addition, domesticated farm animals such as chickens, ducks, and goats are not currently eligible. We get asked sometimes why that is. It's not because we are against those animals or because they're specifically dangerous in any way, but we really don't have the level of research that we need to document these animals' behavior over time. And that means we aren't able to evaluate their predictability and reactions to stress. And those things are very important as we both evaluate teams to be registered and as you as the handler evaluate in each situation whether or not your animal is feeling comfortable able to continue the visit, all of those things. And so without that research, we can't register some of these animals that some folks sometimes ask us about. We also get asked about dog breeds. A dog of any breed or mix of domesticated breeds can participate, provided that its presence does not violate local animal control laws. So if you happen to live somewhere where there are breed restrictions, having your dog registered as a therapy animal does not give you a pass for those breed restrictions. We don't do that, and that's not part of what can be done. But we don't have any breed restrictions for registering the teams. You, however, need to know that wolves and coyote hybrids are not permitted to be registered as a team. All right, so we've talked a little bit about where we visit, the kind of visits, and the species that we register. Let's talk a little more about eligibility. You can see the questions on the slide here. Take a look at these questions and they will help you determine if your animal is ready to pursue joining a Pet Partners Therapy Animal program. I'm not going to read all the questions out loud to you, but I will give you some information that pertains. Animals must be at least 1 year old, with the exception of what we lovingly call pocket pets. Those would be those rabbits, guinea pigs, and rats who you could put in your pocket or your hand. They have to be 6 months old at least. And I'll talk a little bit more in a moment about why, and why sometimes even a year old isn't enough yet, as is the case with my lovely dog, Anara. Birds must have been in the owner's home, lived in the owner's home for at least a year. All other animals must have lived in the owner's home for at least 6 months. Animals must be reliably house trained, and for infection control purposes, waste collection devices worn by the animal are not considered acceptable equipment, regardless of whether your visits are occurring indoors or outdoors. The one exception to that policy is birds, which may wear flight suits. All animals must be on a leash at all times, and this does include those small pocket pets and the birds. We want to look at the safety of the animals in any situation, and to ensure that they need to be on a leash. So if something occurs and you need to get out of there, you're not trying to gather your animal no matter what type it is. Animals may not be fed a raw protein diet. We get that question too, and I'll speak to that in just a moment. And animals with any history of aggression towards people or other pets are not eligible to participate. And that includes animals that have been trained to do bite work, such as Schwitzhund. So if you have a dog that you're also training to do any kind of bite work or aggressive police work or something, then pet therapy is not going to be an option for you to do in addition to that. For the safety of your animal and the people that you visit with, your animal should be in good health, free of internal and external parasites. They may not be on antibiotics, antifungals, or immunosuppressive medications when they are being evaluated or when they are visiting. But if they are on those, they can complete that term of medications and then become eligible to participate. The one caveat there, for those of you that are in the Southwest or have had any experience with it, there is something called valley fever, and the treatment for valley fever is an antifungal. And some dogs, as was the case with my dog Rory, after they are treated and the valley fever is basically in remission, they may stay on the antifungal as sort of a prophylactic to prevent the disease from reoccurring. It's just a maintenance medication. In that particular case, with that particular disease, if you are working with a vet and the vet certifies that your animal is able to participate again, is healthy, then you could still have them participate even on that antifungal. But they shouldn't be symptomatic. They shouldn't still be sick. If your animal meets these requirements and the other requirements that we will these requirements and the basic obedience skills that are appropriate for their species, then this might be a good fit for you and your animal. We do get asked if it's possible to volunteer with an animal that's not your pet. That is possible to do. You must still have all these requirements met, including the time that the pet has been in their owner's home and the age. And you must, of course, have the owner's permission. And then before we move on, I did want to mention a couple of things here: the age and how long the animal has lived in your home or in the owner's home. So the animal has to be, as we said, at least a year old, or I think it was 6 months old for some of the smaller animals. Sometimes at a year old, you still don't see all the behaviors that are predictable enough for you to want to bring your animal into a therapy animal situation. So an animal might need to be older. And Nara is a great example of that. She is a herding dog like Rory. She also is a rescue, and we had some things to work through when she came into my home with trust and confidence issues, as often happens with a rescue dog. She also had given birth and raised some puppies before she came to me. So there have been a lot of things that we've worked through, and then a lot of training, and I've wanted to really keep a close eye on her for the last couple of years and watch her interactions with people, with other animals, and figure out if therapy is the right thing for her, and then what kind of people to interact with would best suit her. And so she's now almost 4, and I'm at a point with her obedience training, with her socialization, and with just learning about her that I'm ready to make some decisions about where she will do therapy work. She will probably work with children, which Rory wasn't ready to do, but Inara's interactions with children are very different than his were. And that's also why the animal, even if they're older, when they come to you, they need to have been in your home for a length of time, because that's how long it takes for you to really get to know their behavior, their disposition, what their strengths are, what their signs of stress are. Different animals show different signs, so that's why we have those rules. So let's talk about what makes a successful therapy animal. In addition to enjoying people, good therapy animals need to accept interactions in a pleasant and forgiving and even welcoming manner, as opposed to just tolerating them. They demonstrate species-appropriate body language, which indicates an interest and relaxation. For example, with your dogs, the friendly tail wag would show that they are enjoying the interaction. A soft body and a relaxed face. Not a tucked tail and shivering, or even just sort of staring off, yawning, looking away, showing signs of stress. Those would show you that they're not as interested in the interaction. They also need to reliably respond to you, the handler's cues, even if there are distractions. If your animal looks to you when they're unsure, when they're nervous, or when they need guidance, that means you already have a strong bond, and that is a really important component to being a therapy animal team. Now, regarding obedience, I mentioned that a bit earlier. Pet Partners does not provide obedience training classes. Handlers must take a handler workshop or course, and we'll talk a little more about that in a bit. But it's up to each team to determine how to develop those basic obedience skills, and whether that's on your own at home, at a local animal training facility, or in some other way, that's totally up to you. The basic the basic obedience and good manners that we require are: your animal can walk on a loose leash near you, the handler. They respond reliably to common commands that are appropriate for their species. So such as with dogs would be sit, down, stay, come, and leave it. I think leave it is probably one of the most important commands for this work, and really for anything with a dog. They don't jump on people or equipment or furniture uninvited. Sometimes during visits, especially depending on the size of your animal and the situation in which you're visiting, you may want to invite your animal to jump up on a chair next to a bed, for example, or maybe on some other type of surface. So having a good command for up or paws up was one I used with Rory, because he was a larger dog, but he would sometimes still put his paws up on a chair so someone could reach him. Those are good commands to have also. And then, of course, the reverse, down or enough or off. They don't vocalize inappropriately, and they can be stopped by the handler. So we wouldn't want an animal, dog or cat, that would be yowling or barking uncontrollably. Sometimes something might startle an animal and they might make a noise, but you can tell them enough or quiet and they would stop. And aggressive barking is never acceptable. So if you have a dog who barks aggressively, that's a sign that they are not suited for this kind of work. They must be reliably housebroken. They must take treats nicely. You can encourage people to not give your animal treats, but you don't want them to take a finger if they are offered one. They don't mouth or lick people during interactions. They don't become overly rambunctious when being petted, so they don't jump up and knock folks over, etc. They can walk past another animal without displaying aggression or excessive fear or any other kind of uncontrolled tendency to go toward that other animal. In other words, they respond to you and they look to you when they see that other animal. They don't demonstrate nosy or intrusive behavior such as begging for treats, exuberantly sniffing people, sticking their noses into bags, purses, wastebaskets. This is where the leave it command comes in very handy, because even the best dog, if they walk into a room and there's something delicious on the floor or something half delicious that's been thrown away, they're going to show interest in it. But if you have a strong leave it command, then you can tell them to leave it and move them away from that thing and know that they aren't going to go after it. Remember that a therapy animal, by definition, needs to enjoy interacting with strangers, which includes being petted, touched, and handled, and sometimes kind of awkwardly. So you as the handler will do what you can to ensure that people know how to pet your animal. For example, you might tell them, hey, he loves to be scratched on the chin, but patted on top of the head is not as fun. You can tell them that, but sometimes people will still pat them on top of the head. So the therapy animals need to be forgiving and tolerant of these kind of differences. Safety is always a priority for both you and your animal and the clients that you meet. So it's critical that a therapy animal doesn't have a history of being aggressive towards people or other animals. All right, so we talked about what makes a successful animal. Let's talk about what makes a successful handler, because you guys are really important too. Now, it's not uncommon for people to focus on what the animal needs to be a therapy animal, but I don't want to overlook your role as a handler, and I don't want you to either. Pet Partners volunteers are professional in their interactions with clients and faculty and staff, as well as fellow volunteers. Now, remember, sorry, I got distracted because something in the display changed. I hope everybody can still hear me. Let me open the audio again and make sure. Oh, yes, okay, my mic is still on. Sorry about that. All right, so back to the handlers. Remember that you will be interacting with strangers as well. So you also, like your animal, need to be comfortable with interacting with other people and strangers in different environments in the midst of distractions. And you have to be able to respond gracefully to a variety of situations that could arrive. You might have someone shake their head and wonder why there's an animal in this hospital. And you have to be able to graciously have that conversation or walk by, depending on what's going on. Maybe they're having a conversation with someone else. I've had occasions at the hospital where I visited with Rory, where once in a while I'd be walking down the hall with him on our way to visit a patient, and some staff member would be walking by with another staff member and make a disparaging comment about animals in the hospital. And I would not respond unless they engaged with me directly, because that would not be appropriate. But you also have to smile and move along and behave professionally. The primary role of the handler, that's you, is to be your animal's guardian. You're your animal's best advocate, and part of that is being able to understand what your animal's strengths and weaknesses are. I talked about that a little bit already with my two animals. If your pet is tempted by food, for example, you want to be able to redirect them any possible interest before it becomes an issue with that leave it command. You also want to be sure that, for example, you don't visit the hospital while lunch is being served, if that is one of the things. And we call anything like that proactive handling. You will be responsible for making decisions about what is and isn't appropriate during the visit, and that's part of being your animal's advocate. When you take the handler course, you'll hear this referred to as YAYABA, Y-A-Y-A-B-A. You are your animal's best advocate, and it will come up a lot. Animal welfare is a priority at Pet Partners, so always make decisions based on what is best for your animal, not just for you or the clients you're visiting. When Rory retired from pet therapy work about almost 2 years before he died. And part of why he retired is that in that last several months of visiting, I started to notice in his visits that he was spending more time looking out windows as we walked by them, looking outdoors. He was also showing signs of fatigue after only visiting for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, where it used to be he could visit for a whole hour. And he was also getting older. He had arthritis. There were other things happening that would make it not unusual for an animal to not physically be ready to walk around the halls of a hospital for an hour. But it wasn't just the physical. I could also see that he was just getting done, that he was excited to get there, but within a few minutes after being there, 15 or 20 minutes, he wasn't interested in being there anymore. And so after some work and changing the kind of visits and changing the length of visits and having that work for a little while, it got to a point where I realized that as much as I wanted to keep visiting, he wasn't as interested anymore. And so we made the decision to retire. So that's a pretty advanced example of that. But it is part of what you have to do, is to pay attention to what they want, not just what you want. All right, so it will be your job also, in addition to paying attention to what they want to do behavior-wise, it will be your job to make sure they're in good health, that they are properly groomed, and that your visits are consistent with the sorry, I got tongue-tied there, consistent with Pet Partners best practices, which help you ensure safe and effective visits for everyone. And you will learn more and more about that in the Handler course as well, what it means to have a safe visit in different environments. Oh, my thing stopped. Let's try that again. There we go. Okay, so therapy teams are volunteers, both you and your animal. In fact, Pet Partners is a volunteer organization, and that means that all the therapy animal handlers are volunteers, and so are the licensed instructors, the team evaluators, and the other folks that you encounter in that situation. They are all volunteers in their community, and they're committed to promoting animal-assisted interventions, as we call them. Now, once you're registered, you will be able to approach facilities in your own community where you can then offer to volunteer as a therapy animal team. You will also need to follow all of the volunteer requirements of the site where you choose to volunteer. Now, this may include something as simple as completing a volunteer application. It may also include meeting health requirements for you and your animal. And it may even include taking additional trainings or orientations. For example, at the hospital where I visited, they had an orientation that we had to go through once. They had a special kind of ID that I had to get for me, and one for Rory as well, in addition to the Pet Partners ID. They even had a vest for the hospital, similar to the Pet Partners vest, but with the hospital logo on it that he wore. And at that hospital, they also required that I got a tuberculosis test annually. And if I was getting a flu shot or other immunizations, I had to provide them with the paperwork to show them that I was getting those. I have friends that volunteer. I mentioned the minimum security prison where they volunteer. They had to do a background check to be able to volunteer there. And sometimes when you volunteer in schools, you have to be fingerprinted or have a background check. So it really depends on where you're volunteering. Maybe you already have an idea of where you would like to visit, but if not, Pet Partners Volunteer Center on the website, which is a wonderful resource in so many ways for you, has a searchable listing of volunteer opportunities. And depending on where you are, there may be a local affiliate. There is where I am, and the local affiliate will also often have a list of places that are looking for volunteers and can even help you figure out what the best place is, what the best match is for you and your pet. So lots of resources for that. So let's talk about the commitment, because that comes up quite a bit too. As a Pet Partners volunteer, it's really up to you to choose where you would like to volunteer and how often. Some teams volunteer once a week or more, other teams less frequently. I have colleagues in where I am that volunteer several times a week. They are retired, most of them. I am not retired. I work full-time for a giant corporation, and so I tend to volunteer a couple of times a month. But sometimes I volunteer on those holidays when other people are home with their families, because I'm single and I don't have children. So sometimes I find that it's really great for me and my pet to go out on Thanksgiving Day or Christmas Day, because it sucks to be in the hospital on those days, and it's wonderful to have a therapy animal team visit you. Although visits never exceed 2 hours a day, remember that you will spend some of that time preparing for your visit, including bathing and grooming your animal before the visit. And of course, you'll want to reserve some time after the visit to unwind with your pet, whether that's playing or just cuddling after a job well done. Rory, when we first started visiting, he was a young, exuberant border collie pup. And after a visit, he didn't want to go home and relax. He wanted to go to the park and maybe run around the court for a while. And I was younger then too, and that was great for me too. The last couple years that he visited, we spent more time coming home and just sort of relaxing in the backyard or on the sofa with a good book and maybe a cookie or something. So it really depends. There is a real commitment to therapy animal work, but it is also unbelievably rewarding. And I really love how flexible it can be. Now, it does depend a little bit on the facility. So again, Rory and I didn't visit in pediatrics for reasons based mainly on his disposition, but I do know that in the pediatrics department at the hospital where we visited, they wanted a more consistent commitment. So they wanted to know that you would be coming every Thursday at 3 o'clock, for example, because they had events that they scheduled for the children in pediatrics. Schools often will want you, if you're doing read to a dog, you're going to come on the same day of the week at the same time, or some number of teams will. In the hospital where I visited, and also in hospices and in most of the assisted living facilities where I visited, they were a lot more flexible. They really just wanted somebody to come, and you could go almost any time, sign in and visit, or call them in advance, sometimes at the assisted living facilities, and make those arrangements on the fly. So it really depends on the location and where you're visiting and what they need, as well as what you want to do. Okay, so we've talked a lot about all the things that make a good team and where you might visit and what makes you a good handler and the commitment. Now let's get down to the details about what you have to do to become a team. The registration process for Pet Partners takes place online, which is awesome. When I first started doing this, it was not at all online. Once you create your free account, I hope you've all already done that. You've gone to the website and created a free account. But if you haven't, I hope after this you will. Once you do that, you can get started on your registration, as well as explore the other resources that are available to help you prepare. And then you'll then get training for the human end of the leash, either online or in an in-person workshop. Now, because the animals need to be healthy in order to register and visit, you will need to ask your veterinarian to complete a form about their health, which you would then submit to Pet Partners, and you can download that form off the website. And then once you have done that, you've created your account, you've done the handler course, you've visited with your vet and gotten them to complete the health screening, then you will need to successfully pass your evaluation. One thing I would recommend, if you have any question at all about anything about your animal's health and doing this work, you may want to visit with your vet first before you invest in the training, just to make sure. If you don't have any question about it, that's fine. But when I was first looking at doing this with Rory, I actually took him in and talked to my vet about it, and just to make sure that he didn't have anything going on that would prevent it. Once you've done all the steps that are listed here, you'll submit your materials to Pet Partners. Again, you do that online. And then once approved, you'll receive a link where you can pay your registration fee and receive your acceptance letter. One of the things I love about the website is that you can go in and you can start the process and track each of the things that you need to do. So you don't have to wait till you have all this stuff and then go online and submit everything. You can do each part and submit the things that need to be submitted as you complete each part. So it's pretty awesome. So let's take a look at these steps in a little more detail. All right, so step one, getting started online. The Volunteer Center is your one-stop shop for all the materials supporting the Therapy Animal program. And as I said, if you haven't already created that free account, you'll need to do so in order to begin the registration process. It's super easy to do. It's gotten even easier. They've done some updates to the website. I was looking at it today to get this deck. It's fantastic. In addition to submitting your registration through the Volunteer Center, you can access the resource library for a variety of supporting materials, from videos to handouts that will help you prepare to evaluate and register with Pet Partners, as well as to join the online community where you can connect with current teams and other prospective volunteers about the process. And once you're registered, you'll be able to search for volunteer opportunities in the Volunteer Center as well. You can even watch a recording of this very webinar that we've been doing at Volunteer Center. Then there's the handler training. Now, of course, there's something really magical about the interactions between humans and animals. But like an actual magic trick that involves a lot of work underneath it, there's a lot to know about how to accomplish that magical moment successfully. So in the Pet Partners Therapy Animal Handler course, you will learn the skills needed to visit safely, as well as what to expect from the team evaluation, so you can prepare for success. You'll also become oriented with the policies and procedures that you will be responsible for following from Pet Partners. Successful completion of the course in the instructor-led format or the online format is required for registering as a therapy animal team. This overview session tonight is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to learning about how to become a handler. All right, and then the animal health screening. So at Pet Partners, as I've mentioned a couple times tonight, the health and safety of your animal is of supreme importance to us. And so in order to participate in the therapy animal program, your veterinarian must sign the animal health screening form. Your animal needs to be in good health to participate. And again, as I mentioned earlier, not currently taking antibiotics, antifungals, or immunosuppressive medications. If you're unsure if a medication that your animal is taking falls into one of these categories, please contact Pet Partners directly and they can assist you with that specific medication and question. For the facilities where you will be visiting, they of course want to ensure that your animal will not pose a risk to any of their clients. Sometimes their clients, especially if it's a hospital, have some weakened immune systems, so we definitely have to be very careful. So your animal needs to be free of internal and external parasites, and dogs, cats, horses, llamas, alpacas, and pigs must all be vaccinated for rabies. That's absolutely required. Okay, let's talk about the evaluation. Evaluations are individual sessions. You are not going to be evaluated with a bunch of other teams or even one other team. It's just you and your pet. They happen with the prospective team and a licensed Pet Partners evaluator. And they typically last about 45 minutes, and they resemble a role play most of the way through, kind of like what you would experience on a visit. Now, as a team, you will be tested with your basic skills, such as obedience, and you're also tested on your team's aptitude for therapy work by simulating some common scenarios that you might encounter during visits with clients. During the team evaluation, we are looking for how well you, the handler, interprets and manages your animal's behavior, and also how well your animal responds to you, the handler, and to also the interactions in the role plays. The emphasis is that the animal, your pet, is under control at all times, and that you as a team inspire confidence in all of those interactions and all of the people that you interact with. And there is a team of people that do this with you, so that the licensed evaluator is there and they have some people with them to help them with the role plays. There are one of two scores that you can get on the evaluation. It's not an A and a B minus or anything like that. It's just predictable or complex. And this will depend on your team's performance. Complex teams are better suited to more dynamic situations where there's a much higher level of activity and a lot less staff involvement. Predictable teams visit in environments where the level of activity is more appropriate for their team's ability level, and there might be a little more staff involvement also. Regardless of your evaluation rating, all teams benefit those they visit. And I do want to say that sometimes your evaluation rating can change. We do reevaluate every 2 years, and there's a lot of good reasons to do that, but one of them is that things change. Rory, at one point during the time that we visited, had got a predictable instead of a complex, and it had to do with the level of distraction that he had, and that was really kind of my first sign that there were some things changing for him, both physically and mentally, that might mean that we might start doing some different types of visits and maybe would eventually have to retire from visiting. So those types of things do happen, and it might shift. So just because you get a predictable the first time doesn't mean you won't get complex later, and vice versa. At no time will your animal be put in a situation that is dangerous. We never do that. The Pet Partners team evaluators who conduct the evaluations are trained by Pet Partners, and they know that the well-being of the animal comes first and second and last and everything in between, no matter what. At no point during the evaluation will animals be hurt or intentionally frightened. As your animal's best advocate, though, if you are ever concerned that your animal is being pushed too far, you can always end the evaluation for the day and try again in the future. I would participate in evaluations quite a bit over the years, and had a couple of occurrences where someone would come in believing they were ready to evaluate, and for whatever reason, their animal was showing some fear. And it might have just been that day. Maybe they had a stressful day, whatever. We always hope that the handler will recognize that and be able to say, you know what, this isn't really going well. Could we stop and could I come back at a different time? That's a good thing. And that reflects well on you, the handler, if that happens too. All right, so the online registration is designed so that you can come back to it each time you complete a step, as I mentioned before. Once you have completed all the steps and provided all the necessary information to Pet Partners, you then submit your registration, and then your registration gets received and reviewed and processed by Pet Partners. And once that happens, you will receive an invitation to pay. And then once you've paid, you'll receive your photo ID badge and your ID number with your expiration date. And as I mentioned, teams do need to renew every 2 years. That requires a reevaluation for the team. It does not require that you take the handler course again, but once you are a registered team, and as long as you are an active registered team, you always can do the online course, and we do update things as we get new research and new learnings. So if you do this for many years, even if you keep renewing, I recommend doing the course again in a few years just to see what's changed. Let's talk about the benefits of being a registered team. Now, benefits of becoming a registered team include several of the things listed here. In fact, the $2 million primary liability insurance policy that you're covered by when volunteering is a great benefit, especially if you're volunteering at smaller places where they don't have their own ability to cover you by insurance. The large hospital I volunteered actually had a pet therapy volunteer program at the hospital. They required that you were registered with Pet Partners or some comparable organization to even be included in their program, but then they had training and other things on top of it, and their volunteers at that hospital in general, not just the therapy animal teams, are covered by the insurance at the hospital, but some places might not have that, and so they wouldn't be able to have therapy animal teams visit at all if Pet Partners couldn't provide this liability insurance. You also get an identification badge for you and a collar tag for your animal. Those are very important also to identify you as a working team. You get access to the free continuing education courses that help you become more effective with clients. So not just taking the handler course again if you want to, but what we talked about with the read, the read to a dog, or the read to read with me. I'm not remembering the name of the program now, but anyway, the reading program, the walk with me program. There's also great continuing ed there for visiting in different types of facilities. So really fantastic stuff. And then of course you get the referral to facilities that are searching for therapy animal teams. You get Interactions magazine. That's our Pet Partners magazine. It's a beautiful magazine. And in addition to some wonderful stories about teams around the country, there's also always the latest research and other things in there. I find it a very useful periodical. You get access to the licensed evaluators and instructors as local resources in your area, support from the Pet Partners office, and of course the satisfaction of knowing that you are helping people in need in your own community. And you get to be part of a highly esteemed program that is setting the standards for incorporating animals into medical care and other sorts of interactions. Pet Partners really is doing some fantastic research and work in all of these areas. Okay, so I did mention at the beginning that if you decide that maybe your animal's not ready yet to do this for whatever reason, we talk about some other ways that you can participate. Now is that time. Not all people and not all animals are a right fit for visiting clients as a therapy animal team. If you're passionate about this work and the good that it does in the community and you want to help in alternate ways, then you might consider volunteering without an animal. You'll notice that a few of the options listed here relate to the Pet Partners team evaluation events. And you'll notice that I mentioned earlier that not just the licensed evaluator, but also a team of folks help with that. The events are a cornerstone of growing the therapy animal program across the country. And without space to use or volunteers to help at the events, well, we can't really effectively and efficiently license new teams or relicense existing teams. So, for example, if your place of work might be willing to host an event, that could be a tangible benefit to your community and those pursuing registration. If there's a community partner in your area, they often can use additional help. Volunteers without an animal who are with a community partner can register as a Pet Partners Ambassador. That's actually how I'm registered right now, because since Rory retired officially almost 2 years ago, I am not a current team, and I'm, like I said, Inara is not quite ready yet, but I still want to volunteer doing these webinars, helping with my local affiliates. So I registered as a Pet Partners Ambassador, so I could do that. Another fun option to support therapy animal work is participating in our celebration of National Therapy Animal Day. We have an event called Treats and Sweets, which is a bake sale style fundraiser. It's hosted by Pet Partners every spring, and you can be a baker and you can compete for prizes and recognition for fundraising on behalf of Pet Partners, and also make some great treats and have a lot of fun. We also host the world's largest pet walk. It's a fun event that anyone with a pet can participate in. You might consider getting involved with your local Pet Partners affiliate, if there is one, and with your local community by participating in that event. And then finally, if you believe deeply in the power of the human-animal bond and you want to do some additional work in that area, you might consider joining the Pet Partners Advocacy Program. And I'm going to talk about that in a little more detail. So, the Grassroots Advocacy Program. In 2017, Pet Partners launched a free, nonpartisan advocacy program for those who want to help educate and influence our lawmakers, local and national, by being a vocal proponent for the human-animal bond. Now, this goes beyond just therapy animals. For example, Pet Partners was a key member of the coalition that worked to pass the Pets and Women's Safety Act, which was legislation that allowed women who were escaping domestic violence to bring their family pets to the shelters with them. So, if you believe that animals have a positive impact on human health and well-being, Pet Partners can provide a way for you to contact your representatives and let them know that you are there to promote and defend the human-animal bond. You can sign up online at petpartners.org/advocacy for this great free program and to learn more about it. And that brings us to petpartners.org, the website. And that also brings our presentation to a close, except for any questions there might be, which I will answer in a moment. You can find more information on the Therapy Animal Program at the website listed here, as well, of course, all the registration information, and the Pet Partners Grassroots Advocacy Program that I mentioned is also there. And you can find us on the social media sites listed here. If you have a local affiliate, you may find them on various social media as well. I know my local affiliate, we have a very active Facebook group. There's a public side of it. There's also a private group for those that are registered teams in the area. So you may find those type of resources as well. Ladies, do we have, Catherine or Felice, do we have any questions that need answering?
Why, yes, we do. Hi, Susan. So the first question that we have are, we have somebody who's wondering if you have any ideas for socialization. Obviously, taking your dog to the hospital while you're trying to socialize them is probably not the best place.
No.
So you're working with Inara. What are some of the things that you're doing to get her ready for therapy and animal work?
Great question. So fortunately, I live in a community that has a lot of opportunities for that, and I do a variety of things. So I go to cafes and places where I can sit outside with her, and I let her sit out there and interact with people. And I also work on her paying attention to me and not interacting until I ask her to, because we want to recognize if somebody wants to interact or not. So I work on that type of thing. We go to like Ace Hardware and this place called Allen's Shoes. They let me do that. I also go on lots of walks in different parts of the neighborhood and different places to get her used to different things. Because she was a rescue dog, I wanted to make sure there was no fear about different environments. We go to parking garages and walk up and down stairs, maybe take an elevator to see how she does with that. And then I work with her in parks. I don't go to dog parks, off-leash dog parks. That's just a personal preference of mine. But I work with her in our neighborhood park and in other parks where there are other animals to get her to pay attention to me when other animals are running around. Because Inara is one of those dogs that has a little bit of, I don't want to call it aggression because she's not trying to attack other dogs, but she gets excited and doesn't know what to do with her excitement, especially when she's on leash and there are other dogs running around. And so I need to learn to watch that physicality and get her attention. And now she is consistently, and I'm very proud of her, she's very consistently, anytime there's another dog running around, especially a dog off leash who's running and chasing or doing whatever, she immediately turns and looks at me, and I immediately reward her for that. So that's something else I do with her as far as the socialization. And then I work with people I know who have dogs so we can get her to socialize with other dogs. Took an agility class with her, that type of thing. So that's a lot of stuff, right? But it's really getting into a variety of different environments where your dog will be welcome and paying attention to them and working with them. So you don't just go somewhere and sit down and have dinner with your friend while your dog lays at your feet and you don't even notice them. This is an active work with you and your animal in these different environments. And a lot of it is even just to see how they react and what you need to do to support them. So I hope that helps.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So there's a couple questions here about the handler training. So I'll go ahead and answer that as a staff member. The online handler course is $70 for new volunteers. You only have to pay that once. So once you take that the first time, then once you become a registered volunteer, you're eligible to take it again whenever we update it or for your own information. Just that'll be free of charge once you become a registered volunteer. So like if you take the course this year and then like 3 years from now we've given a totally new version, you'd be able to take that for free. It's also offered in a workshop format in your local area, depending on whether or not you have a local instructor, and the fee for that will vary. The hard copy of the book that you get for the class costs $20, and then there'll usually be additional costs based on whatever the instructor needs to pay for the space that they're using. As Susan said, all of our evaluators and instructors are volunteers, and we don't want them to like be spending hundreds of dollars renting space and then just doing that out of pocket all of the time. So that covers the ideas about the fee. So let me take a look and see what else we have. Oh, looks like Catherine posted a link about the acceptable equipment. Here's a question here from somebody who was wondering if there are certain types of collars that dogs need to wear or avoid. Do you feel that you can answer that one, Susan?
Yeah, I think I can, and then you can check me on it. So
Sure.
As far as avoiding, no shock collars, no prong collars. I'm not a big proponent of those collars in general, but we certainly don't want them when they're at when they're visiting or in an evaluation. They are not permitted. What I will tell you from experience is you may be using a buckled collar or a martingale collar, whatever. That's fine. You may have a dog that you like to use a harness with for whatever reason. I like to use a harness with a Nara, partly because it has a handle on the top, and so if she gets, when we go hiking or something, if she gets herself into a tight spot, I can pull her out, so that's helpful. It's also nice to have a harness, one of the easy leader type harnesses, not the one on the face, but an actual harness. If you have a dog that has likes to chase or something and you're training them. But the thing to know is, if you evaluate with a harness, then if you've evaluated with that and you get registered with that, they're going to have to wear that harness for all visits at that point. So if you don't want to always have your dog wearing a harness in visits, do the evaluation with the collar. I think that covers all of it.
It does, and something that not everyone thinks about is like if you have, like this sometimes comes up with smaller dogs, if your dog has a collar with like lots of sparkly rhinestones on it, those aren't okay either, and that's mainly because a client could hurt themselves by getting scratched by the collar. So they're not, inappropriate, but except in the case of visiting. We wouldn't want anyone to accidentally hurt themselves, which is why you also can't use like a chain leash or a chain harness, even if it's not like a choke collar, a restrictive collar. You cannot have chains or anything that could hurt somebody on it.
And that does bring up one other thing: no costumes. So the vest, absolutely, that's their working suit, if you will. And I do believe we allow bandanas under situations where it's not in any kind of danger, but there's no costumes. You're not going to volunteer as a team and have your dog show up, or any other animal show up in like a full-on costume of some sort. And that has to do with comfort, visibility, safety of your animal and of the people that are visiting with them, all of those things.
Okay, we've got time for a few more questions before the top of the hour. Here's somebody this is a very common question. How do you discourage your dog from licking if you have an animal that is a licker? Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, so we get that question quite a bit. So there's a few things that I would recommend you do. And what I'm going to recommend now is dog specific. I've never tried to train any other animal to not lick, so I don't know if this will work with other animals. But I actually find that having an enough command, which is separate from the leave it command, is a very good thing to train your dog with for all of these things. So whether Nara is barking at the school bus, which she likes to do, or the garbage truck, or whether she's licking my father, who comes over and he might be sweaty from working outside and she wants to lick him. Any kind of teaching the dog that when you say enough, they stop whatever they're doing, whatever it is, and they look to you or they come to you. That is a great command to have, because then you can use that in all those situations. Dogs typically want to lick either because there's something that tastes good, obviously, or licking is often actually a sign of stress. So if your dog is licking uncontrollably at you or somebody they're with, you might want to check and see if they're actually stressed out and if that's why they're licking. So that's kind of what I'll say about that.
All right, excellent. So here's a couple breed-specific questions. Somebody has a 9-month, very friendly, hyper golden doodle, and this sounds to me like it would be a good example of why some dogs may need to be a little bit older, yeah, before they can register. We say 1 year old to register, but you're going to know your animal best. Yeah. You're going to know if, you know, Fluffy just cannot help but bounce all over the people they meet. Yep. That's not a safe situation. You could knock somebody over, you could scratch, there's no harm, no fault at all. Your animal needs to be reliable, predictable, and controllable. And while you may be able to predict that they're going to bounce all over somebody, that's not what we want to see. Then there's another question here about the best breeds for pet therapy. Someone's in the process of looking for a dog.
You know what? There isn't really one. And I know that sounds really cliche, but you wouldn't think that border collies would be great therapy animals because they want to herd, because they have especially a high drive. But border collies, for example, because that's what I typically work with, some dogs are high drive and some dogs are low drive and some dogs are in between. And some dogs who have some drive still in certain situations don't display that drive, right? So it's really about getting to know the dog. You might think that a golden doodle or a golden retriever would be the best therapy animal, because we do see those as assistive dogs a lot. And they might very well be, but they also often take time to mature. We have several golden retrievers in our local affiliate who are wonderful therapy animals, but they're all around 4 or 5 years old, and they were not going to be good therapy animals at 1 or 2 years old because of their exuberance and how long they take to mature. So it's really about the disposition of the individual animal, and it's really about how you train them. So if you have a dog that you've been training to be a hunter or a guard dog, they're probably not going to be a good therapy dog, right? Regardless of the breed. So that's really the best answer I can give to that.
Okay, awesome. We're right at the top of the hour, so it's about time to wrap this up. Two questions I want to get to real fast. There's a question as to if there's a minimum time frame between evaluations. So the answer to that is if you and a family member are evaluating with the same dog on the same day, you would have a 30-minute break between evaluations. If you as the handler are evaluating and you don't pass your evaluation, you need to wait at least until the next day to evaluate again, but we usually recommend waiting a week or two and working on whatever skill gave you problems at the evaluation event.
Yeah, totally.
And then one final question for the Read With Me program. Where is the handler while the dog is being read to?
With the dog and holding the leash. You don't get to wander. You don't get to wander off while your dog's being read to.
It's a very good question, right? Because
Yeah.
that's one of the premises of Pet Partners is you are always holding the leash no matter what. You do not give up the leash to anybody. We don't have you leave your dog in a room and go somewhere else. We just don't.
Yeah, even if you are working with a therapist and say part of the therapy is the patient is going to walk your dog, you would then have two leashes. And they might hold one leash that might be attached, but not in a way that really shows any control over the dog. And you would have the other leash and you would still be the handler in control of the dog. So.
Right. So, well, we've had an excellent session this evening. Thank you so much, Susan, and thank you everyone for participating. We hope that you found this session to be helpful. The recording will be posted on our website, which is www.petpartnerswithans.org, and we hope to see you in our therapy animal program in the future.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night, and thanks for attending.